sex. Okay, do I have your attention yet? Interestingly, we act like sex is absolutely no big deal in our culture today, and yet we're obsessed with it. How can you be obsessed with something that's just no big deal? And yet we never ask the question, why is it such a big deal? We sort of take sex and treat it like it's some dangling participle out there, disconnected from any other part of us. Interestingly, in conjunction with the old Hebrew vision of wisdom and reality, we didn't come up with the idea, and yet we take over this thing that we call sex and do whatever we want with it. Interestingly, it has a context. It doesn't just come out of nowhere where you just pull it out of thin air, and we feel the impact of that anyway. But it had a context, and when it showed up in all its beauty and all its glory in a relationship with a man and a woman, where they actually left something and they came together and they became one. That sexual union, the beauty of our bodies together, had a context of safety and loyalty and exclusivity. Interestingly, that's the very thing that God asked from us, that what he ultimately asked from us is our loyalty and our exclusivity that would bind us to his heart. We treat sexual encounter today as though it's something people just do with no price tag, as though there's no fray from it, no outcomes from what it is that we do. But we know from science it's just not true. This isn't a quote, a believing thing or a faith thing. We know from the scientific community that things happen chemically when two people encounter sexual union and orgasm. There's bonding that takes place. There's pleasure that takes place. I remember speaking to a woman who eventually communicated to me one day in a conversation that she was a stripper. When I asked her what it was like, it was interesting. She said, literally, it's just all mind games for me. But I remember every face. See, maybe it's not a game. Maybe we're actually hardwired in a way that sex has a purpose on purpose, and it actually talks about the most intimate relationship that two people can have, which is a relationship ultimately with God Almighty. It's interesting in the scriptures to me that Jesus is known as the groom, and his followers or his church are his bride. And when they come together in a union of intimacy, where God places his spirit, his seed, into the very heart of a human being. Who but God would ever give an illustration or a metaphor that most declares what it's like to know him, with Jesus being the groom and his followers a bride, and knowing what they do on their wedding night when they consummate the marriage and live in a context where new life can come out of that relationship? That God would use that relationship as the most significant metaphor from the garden all the way to the book of Revelation, where the groom comes for his bride. That is the most significant relationship, an illustration to speak about what it means to know God. Maybe sex is a big deal for a reason, because it speaks to the very essence of what it means to be human.